Hey y'all, bet you didn't know that print is dead. That is my favorite line from tonight's episode of American Crime Story Impeachment. Comes from the wonderful Billy Eichner as Matt Drudge, who we are introduced to in this episode. We have a lot to talk about: the introduction of characters like Matt Drudge and others, the thickening of the plot, the progression of Paula's case. So let's just jump right into episode 3 of American Crime Story Impeachment, or again, Impeachment American Crime Story. I always mess that up. We open the episode with Billy Eichner and this very kind of noir inspired scene with him working in a CBS gift shop, kind of showing that he knows a lot of knowledge on the industry and is more focused a little bit on the gossipy side of things. I think that has definitely upplayed the image, the story of both Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's marriage and eventual divorce, as well as the journalist that he claims is the journalist of days past. He kind of focuses on the image versus reality and really plays that up, which I think very quickly characterizes him. And then we also get that great scene of him dumpster diving for kind of memos from the studio, and we get a great memo. It has to do with Jerry Seinfeld and the cast of Seinfeld increasing significantly their numbers, but specifically Jerry Seinfeld being offered $1 million to continue doing episodes of Seinfeld. Some of you might be wondering, maybe not. I don't know how much my audience watches Seinfeld or cares to know this tidbit, but I am the queen of fun facts, so I will give it to you. Seinfeld was an NBC show when it was on the air. However, it was completely filmed at CBS, and it was a show that was not owned exclusively by NBC. And so that's why you have that difference in studio versus distributing network. So is that super nerdy? Yes, but did I want to show off the things I learned in school in case I'm never able to use my degree for anything other than this? You know it. So I think we get a really great introduction to him, the obvious state of the internet at the time, and kind of the way he views news as being hot and gossipy and fast, and not what we've been seeing in the show up until this point, which is very discreet journalism based on sources, kind of, yes, it starts with gossip, but gossip doesn't constitute a story the way that Matt Drudge sees it. So I think that's a really interesting introduction into the character, and then the evolution that we see take place over the kind of time jumps that this show explores. But again, the casting on the show is incredible. My next note is that Clive Owen as Bill Clinton is absolutely fantastic, as is Kobe Smulders as Ann Coulter, as is the actor that plays Michael Isikoff, down to Sarah Paulson, Beanie Feldstein, and Annalise Ashford as the 3 main women in the series. Like, casting is just top notch in the series, as it is in almost everything that Ryan Murphy does. Again, am I exposing myself as a Ryan Murphy fangirl? 1000%. The casting is just great, and especially in a story like this where kind of almost everyone is very unlikable, makes questionable decisions. It's great to have really, really talented actors playing those characters to really kind of intrigue you while these characters are doing not so great things. I really like the way that this show and some of Ryan Murphy's other shows have handled the more conservative figures or Republican figures in history. Specifically, in this episode, we get the introduction of the Elves, which are a bunch of lawyers who are on the conservative side of the movement, who are potentially working together to kind of invade or kind of intersect with some of these court cases against Bill Clinton so that they can potentially take him down or lead towards impeachment. And what I have to say is I really, again, this goes with the casting. If you wanted to, you could cast very untalented people for the side of politics that Hollywood doesn't tend to agree with, or you could very easily completely paint them as the bad guys. But I think honestly what this episode presents to me is that no matter how potentially bad these characters are on either side of the aisle, in journalism, in politics, Linda Tripp, or any of Paula Jones's lawyers, as bad as any of those people are, Bill Clinton was worse in the things that he did, the people he took advantage of, and the people whose lives were ruined by their intersection with him. So I really gotta say, I noticed this in Mrs. America, but Ryan Murphy, his writers, his production team, everyone that works on any sort of series that sort of get attached to his name, I feel like the political ones really do a good job of presenting intricacies and duality to both sides of the aisle politically, and I really respect that because you don't see that a lot in Hollywood, especially in Hollywood productions of this caliber. And so I really appreciated that. I also liked how this episode touched, going off of that, on the discussion of elite education. We get this most in Mark Isikoff's conversation with Matt Drudge, and the fact that Mark Isikoff says he went to, I don't know, some Ivy League school to study journalism, whereas Matt Drudge didn't go to college, and straight out of high school he worked at 7-Eleven. And I think this is a very interesting conversation that's still going on today about what it means to get an elitist education potentially, or who actually gets to belong in politics or have their voice matter, which I touched on last week with how Paula Jones was not portrayed as the most intelligent woman, and also she was stereotyped to be the country bumpkin who is just kind of like found herself in this scandal. But I think what's interesting is here, even on the journalism side, of two people who come from pretty much the same political ideology, they're disagreeing and having these discussions about who kind of deserves to get their stories told, and how people who go through schooling, although that should be admired, does that mean that they're the only ones capable and the only ones that should be allowed to tell stories with journalistic integrity? But I think it also parallels the power imbalances in the show. Washington insiders, people who have worked in the business for years, who are experienced, who know the dark underbelly of politics, how they tend to kind of oppose themselves to outsiders, and how they tend to take advantage of those in more naive positions in regards to politics, both capital P politics and just the politics of the system. I also think there's a really interesting conversation here that was maybe one of my favorite scenes, is the scene between Isikoff and Matt Drudge, is the conversation about news and whether Matt Drudge stole Isikoff's story. It brings me back to Script Notes, which is a podcast I love to listen to with Craig Mazin and John August, and they talk constantly about how your idea for a show or movie is not something that can be stolen or copyrighted, but it is actual words on a page. And it shows kind of both that idea of you don't own a story or a piece of work just because you've been working on it longer. You don't have sole ownership over that thing, but also to show the shift in how news is portrayed now, and the shift into the modern era where news is about being the first, the quickest, the hottest story, the most clickbait title, as opposed to really kind of digging through the trenches. And I'm not trying to say that one form of journalism is better than the other. Obviously, there's inaccuracies that can occur in both, or bias that can also occur in both. However, I just think it's interesting to see how this show is exploring the advent of the internet and how it has changed news and the way we take in information. I also noticed, just because I pointed this out specifically last week, the camera between Bill and Monica in this episode is still. It never shows them in a romantic relationship or in a romantic situation. It only shows them when Bill is already prepared to break up with Monica, and when they are broken up, and when she is trying to get her job back. But these are very static camera motions. Before, I talked about how the camera was handheld and kind of shaky to almost create the imbalance of power there and show how uncomfortable and tense the scenes are, that they're kind of doing something that they're very much not supposed to be. In these scenes between the two of them, I felt very much like the camera being stable was kind of reinforcing that there is kind of a balance of things again, and a little bit more power, that once she is not being emotionally manipulated by him in the relationship, that she kind of remembers that she is not kind of beholden to him, even though she still sort of is. So maybe, am I stretching a little bit? Maybe. I felt like she gained power despite the fact that she is emotionally devastated by their breakup. The last thing I want to touch on, which was towards the end of the episode, was the framing of Linda. When Linda is talking to Isikoff at the hair salon of her friend who kissed Bill Clinton in the very first episode, she says she wants to insert herself. She wants to matter. And that is exactly what we see in Linda Tripp when she buys those Newsweek magazines and sees her name in print. In all instances, with Isikoff, with her friend from the White House, with Monica, she wants to have her name in print. She wants to be acknowledged for digging into the middle of the stories. And as Kathleen Wiley, there we go, as she points out, Linda kind of doesn't have a lot going on in her personal life, and her professional life is very stunted and unsatisfying for her, and so she chooses to seek out these opportunities where she can be in the middle of something very important again, and that is what she craves. That is why she loved the White House so much. That is why she loves meddling in Monica's drama and all of the other scandal going on. That, guys, is all I have for my review of episode 3 of Impeachment, American Crime Story. I got it right this time. But what did you think? Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this episode. Are you still watching weekly? Are you ready for the show to be bingeable? Please be sure to go down below, hit the like button if you enjoyed my review, and hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss next week's review or any of my other entertainment and kind of nerdy content. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an absolutely amazing night, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, everyone.